I think this problem, like with a lot of very complex technical projects, my advice here is to work backwards. I don't also work at DoorDash. I'm not on your team. I don't have enough specific details to really pull out something concrete. But here's what I can say. You have to essentially build out this component that does this. And then there's these two options. There's this third party solution, which looks like kind of sucks. And then there's, like, let's just build it ourselves. But then that would just take a lot of work. And, it's that's a very, very hard question to answer. Do I just kind of outsource it or do I build it myself? And then the outsourcing solution is going to be further ahead, obviously. They have something built, some SDK built, and they're selling it. And then it looks like you're starting from scratch. And what I mean when it comes to working backwards is the main thing is the timeline, right? Because to me, it looks like there's kind of two overall options here. There's go with a third-party solution, which will be faster, but it's going to be pretty bad. It's going to be better than nothing, but it looks like not that much better than nothing. And then there's like build it ourselves, which will take God knows how long. It'll almost certainly be higher quality. It'll be like DoorDash quality. DoorDash is a company I respect, and I'm sure has great engineers, but it could take a long time. And when you kind of boil it down to these two things, the timeline can inform it very greatly. Because if the timeline is pretty aggressive and your acceptance criteria is like just to have something, even if it's crappy, by this pretty aggressive time, then I think you just have to go with the third-party solution. But if you have more time, right, and then just building it yourself, first party becomes a lot more lucrative, right? Because it's possible that you can deliver it by that time. And then another thing you can work backwards from is the acceptance criteria. If the acceptance criteria is, this new component we build needs to have like this level of fidelity of accuracy. It needs to be hit a pretty high quality bar. If the third party solution is so far away from that, then that also, it just kind of crosses itself out, right? Because like you can't like go to the third party solution and just like rewrite the entire thing to be better. Right, that's just breaks so many rules, right? It's it's their proprietary information. They would have to give you a ton of access. You're just kind of doing the work for them, right? That's just really terrible. In that case, you're that also, if you have a really high acceptance bar, then you just kind of have to build it in house, right? And then that one is actually even more powerful because then you just have to scope out what it takes to build it in house, and then you kind of get to set the timeline, right? Because if a high quality acceptance bar is just set in stone, then you kind of have to build it yourself, right? In terms of like how to measure it, again, it depends on the timeline, right? If you have a lot of time, then yeah, you can take the time to think through metrics. But if the timeline is pretty aggressive, then you can just turn the main criteria for success as ship goal, which is like we just built something that works, and meets the basic acceptance criteria. We're not going to add like a bunch of logging on like all the micro interactions within the component. That will just come later, right? And I think when it just comes to shipping the first thing, you don't have to ship it with a bunch of internal metrics because shipping metrics in and of itself is a lot of work. Not only do you have to add the logging, but you have to add the data pipeline and the processing, and you have to think about how to meaningfully extract insights from all the metrics and dashboards and all that stuff. It's like figuring out data analysis and data strategy is almost a project in and of itself, right? So I think what's important to understand here is like, why are you building this particular component? Like, why are you facing this conundrum of like, do I use a third-party service or build a first-party solution? I assume there's some top-line metric the introduced existence of this component is trying to move. So you can just goal yourself against that, right? So if it's to increase the amount of clicks on this button in DoorDash by whatever amount of percent, then you can just kind of track that in whatever A/B test you use to kind of gauge on the existence of this component or the non-existence of this component. So yeah, those are my thoughts there. Yeah, this is definitely a problem that I empathize with a lot because I've had experience with third-party SDKs before, both at Robinhood and at Course Hero. Smaller companies will tend to look more into third-party SDKs because they don't have the resources of a company like Meta, where you can just build everything in-house, and it's just super messy because it's not an engineering problem when you're working with a third party, because like you need to figure out like the contract and you don't have control over their code, and then if they have a SEV, then you also have a SEV, and that's like kind of awkward. Like you now have this SEV you don't really have complete control over. So yeah, like what I will say just based on based on the context of this problem is that it seems like the first party way is the way to go, unless it's just literally impossible and would take like 5 years.